All right, welcome. As I said just before, I am Jamie Raffel. I am the head of product and design here at Clever, and I am incredibly excited here on this Monday to spend an hour with you all. First, we just have an amazing group of panelists here to talk about our subject of building with purpose, figuring out how to create product inclusion with the software that we create in the EdTech ecosystem. And so I want to talk a little bit about why we're gathering today, what the point is, and why this topic is so important to talk about now. And then we're going to have our panelists introduce themselves. So I think it's an important conversation for a number of reasons. Product inclusion, there's a reason that a lot of us who build software for K through 12 education do what we do. We think it's important. We think that it has impact. And when we think about product inclusion, we think about all the ways that we could have beneficial or harmful impact on the students and the teachers and the other folks in education that we serve. But it is a now conversation. It is something that is important now. First, I think, obviously, but importantly, there's just an increased amount of usage of software in education. That's been true and growing for a number of years, but particularly post-pandemic, it's especially true. There's been a focus on inclusion and the ways that software can either support making sure that all learners have access to a quality education, or can harm it if we get things wrong. These topics have been in the public eye. There's a lot of political movement, there's legislation, there's discussion. So suddenly the role that software can play in education around potentially difficult issues is something that is on a lot of folks' minds, parents, educators, software creators. And then last but not least, the technology is always changing. I think just in the last couple of years, we're grappling with the ways in which things like AI may change software in education again. And we've had a lot of changes over the last few years. And so every time there's a change, we need to kind of go back, I believe, to these fundamentals of how we do what we do, what the purpose is, and how we can make sure that all learners are included. So with that, that's what I'm bringing to the conversation and why I think it's important to have this now. And I also welcome all of you. So we have more than 100 attendees. We're going to start off with questions from me and interesting learnings and wisdom from these wonderful panelists that we're about to do introductions for. But we're going to make some space for you all to contribute as well, both in the chat and with some Q&A towards the end, because there's a lot of I'm looking at the chat and seeing all the folks who are coming in from different areas of our ecosystem. And I'm going to want to hear from you all as well. So this group of people that we've gathered are primarily folks who either work at a creator of educational software, we've got a few of those, or an expert in that area. And our hope by the end of this conversation is that we've shared a little bit of what collectively this group knows about product inclusion, and then also we open up some questions, because I know we don't know everything. So that's the intent, and then maybe we can send you all away with some next steps to figuring out how to further this. So with that, let's start with our panelists. I would love to start with Kimberly, and let's just share your name, title, and the organization you're with, and we'll move around the group.
All right. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Kimberly Smith. I co-lead the Center for Inclusive Innovation at Digital Promise, where we bring together educators, researchers, technology providers, solution providers, students, parents, and families to co-create and address challenges in education through research and design and development. And my pronouns are she and her, and I'm happy to be here. Should I pass it?
Yes, pass the mic.
All right, I'm passing it to Sarah.
Thank you, Kimberly. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Romero-Heaps. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Seesaw Learning. I'm really, really excited to be here today. Seesaw provides a learning experience platform focused primarily on pre-K-6, on elementary learners. We think a lot about product inclusion because a lot of what our product does is create a learning experience where students feel a sense of belonging and feel like their identities are honored. And that's really important to us and really important to celebrate authentic student voice. So I'm really, really happy to be here, honored to be among these other panelists, and I'm looking forward to today. Thanks for hosting, Clever team.
All right, and Deanna?
Hello, I am Deanna Smith, and I'm the Chief Diversity and Public Affairs Officer at GoGuardian. GoGuardian, we have products that range from safety and productivity, as well as curriculum and instruction products. We mostly serve, we serve the K-12, and we have a number of different products across tutoring, again, instruction and safety. Product inclusion is very important to us for probably similar reasons as the other panelists have mentioned. But in addition, we know in order for us to reach our mission, which is keeping all students safe and creating environments where they can learn and be able to accomplish all the amazing things they want to in the world, we know that it is important that we are thinking about and building for students who are on the margins. We know that if we do that, we'll reach everyone in between. And I will pass to Karina.
Hey everybody, I'm Karina Lynch. I am the Chief of Staff at BrainPOP. Before that, I was the Chief Product Officer. I've been with BrainPOP for about 19 years. Before that, I was a classroom teacher. I was both a technology teacher and a 5th grade teacher in New York City. And I think it has been incredibly important to us to build products for teachers and students that are accessible and inclusive of all. So with that,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, welcome all of you. I'm excited. And actually, Karina, let's stick with you for now for the first question that I want to ask. And we'll go around for all the other panelists. But starting with you, just if you could share a little bit about the context of BrainPOP and your organization and what it does, but then also let's talk about what happens if your product doesn't do a good job serving end users, especially those from marginalized communities.
Sure. So I think one of my favorite kind of framing things to think about when building products for BrainPOP and thinking about products that really work is having low floors, high ceilings, and wide walls. And it's something that Mitch Resnick, one of my heroes, shared with me and that I think about all the time, which is like building products that are incredibly easy for students to get into, for all students to get into. But then there's just really a high level of sophistication they can reach within the product, and that there's multiple paths for them to take those wide walls within the product. So not just one cookie cutter experience that's pushing students through to the same place. And so where I think this has been really important for BrainPOP is we expose kids to, we also use like the UDL principles of multiple means of representation and expression within the product. But we can be a great means to get all kids quickly on the same page with the background knowledge and vocabulary they need to then go into a lesson that a teacher is teaching. So, you know, when I taught, I have 34 kids in the classroom, and they're bringing all kinds of various prior knowledge and life experiences, and they have so much that they're bringing into a topic. But it's different, and kind of respecting all the things that students are bringing in, and then building off of it, giving them this common experience, a shared level of vocabulary, and then creating experiences where they can show what they know and demonstrate what they know in a variety of different ways, and not just, you know, a one size fits all approach has been really important to us.
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else want to take a crack at just a little bit about your organization, but then just the ways where that impact comes from and what can happen if we fail to meet it?
I'm happy to jump in also. So GoGuardian, as I mentioned, we have kind of 2 categories where we think about our products. So on safety and productivity, when we think about our safety products, so helping to ensure that students have safe experiences on the web, while respecting a certain amount of respect for their privacy and their uniqueness at the same time is, you know, can be challenging, and helping students to really understand why we are there, and that their safety is important to us. We have products that alert have suicide alerts where students are searching for things that could lead to self-harm, and just helping them to understand. We don't throw out stats about how many of these alerts have helped students, but it really, when we think about the work that we do, that it makes it super meaningful for us also. Not doing that well would be awful for students who maybe are, depending on, what they're searching, et cetera. If there's cultural nuances that we're not thinking about, or we have specific groups that are experiencing more maybe blocking of sites than others. So we think about all of those things as we're creating our products. And on the curriculum and instruction, obviously it is an honor to be able to create products to help students learn and to help guide them through this journey in K-12. And it's important for us that they use our products and see themselves, whether it's avatars with different hairstyles like braids and dreads, or different hearing aids and wheelchairs. It's super important for us to know that our students see themselves. So not doing that well, we know that there's been tons of research and studies to show that when you do not see yourself reflected in things that you do think highly of, or that your teachers think highly of, then you think that the absence means that you are not good enough, or that your group isn't represented. And so that's super important to us.
I'll just build on that at Digital Promise, and I appreciate what you said, Karina, in terms of the phrase that you use. We focus a lot on how to ensure student agency in their learning. So whether it's competency-based approaches, creating experiences where students can determine their own progression, their own pace, their own curiosities, their own exploration, being able to make sure that products and systems support students being able to make those choices, to be able to choose their own pathway, and to really take learning in the kind of context in which they feel comfortable and feel most engaged and motivated to learn. That's a real critical part of how we think about student learning. That's also reflected in the work we're doing with our learner variability navigator, right? Hundreds and hundreds of strategies for how teachers and how EdTech product developers can build in features and functions and mechanisms that support diverse learners across a wide spectrum of how we think of learners. And so going beyond just looking at a student in 2 dimensions, but 3 dimensions, even 4 dimensions, and more, to think about what students need and how they learn. I think that's critical, because I came up in an age and time when that was not the case. In fact, probably most of us did. And to what Deanna was saying about the learning, the belonging, the identity, the agency, that's not something that we had access to, and the outcomes are sometimes devastating, right, for students. So it's something that we have to keep in mind. How do we really make sure the learning is adapted to learning differences?
And just to echo, I love everything that was said, and now I'm taking notes of what you all say and bringing it back to the team. I love this. Because Seesaw focuses on our youngest learners, starting at pre-K, I think all of us carry a pretty heavy weight of that responsibility. And something we keep in mind is, and we center everything around creating joyful, inclusive, connected experiences. And because we're at that heart of the learning experience and the way students think about their day and go through their day and connect with their families and their teachers and other students, there's just a lot of responsibility in that. There's also a lot of room to do good. And something we think about a lot is the research that shows that a student's enjoyment of school at age 6 is a predictor of their long-term academic outcomes. And I think that that's probably not shocking to any of us who have kids, who have been educators. But I think it's really different than most of the research we often hear, which is about academic performance or literacy levels at younger grades. It's really about, if a kid loves learning, that means they're going to go off and they have a higher likelihood of having better outcomes. And We know that students from historically marginalized communities are often the ones who are at the most risk for not having that sense of belonging and inclusion. And so I think that that makes it for us all the more important to focus on those populations. To, like Deanna said, to achieve our mission, we need to reach all the students with joyful, connected, inclusive experiences. And that means we have to really focus on populations that may otherwise not have those, or it may be harder, or the system is not built for them to have those experiences.
I love these answers. I'm also seeing some amazing comments and questions in chat, and I think some of them are bringing me close to maybe the next question, which is, let's say that I am, I'm building software, I'm working for an EdTech organization, and I care about this. Everything that we've just said feels very, very important to me. And Sarah, to your point, I'm carrying that weight. How do I get started? And so I think in order to help answer that question, I want to start with each of the journeys that your organizations have gone through when you're thinking about product inclusion, maybe where you got started or what some of the early challenges were. So Deanna, let's start with you. Can you talk a little bit about some of that journey at GoGuardian?
Absolutely. So I will say the journey at GoGuardian started far before I joined. I've been there 2 years. And so I was very pleasantly, not surprised, but very happy to see that there had been thought. But what we did notice when I joined, one of the reasons I decided to join GoGuardian, especially as the Chief Diversity Officer, was that in addition to the privilege of making sure that employees have an inclusive experience at work, the role is very focused also on everything from our marketing to our products to our ensuring that we're hearing the voices, diverse voices as well. And so when I joined, I also created a team, which is a research and development team focused on equity and inclusion, which was absolutely amazing for us to be able to realize that in order for us to do this well, we do have to be very intentional. There are two areas that we really noticed that we felt like we were kind of missing voices. And this is not just the case for GoGuardian, it's typical. But if you begin ideation and you think about those who are in the room during ideation, oftentimes we were missing the voices of those from marginalized groups. And so thinking about co-creating and how we could connect with those teachers and students who were in these groups, you don't have to go far when they're already your customers if you're intentional about it. So thinking about that, and then also testing. And so we're working through now, how do we ensure that voices and perspectives are heard during those times? This is an ongoing journey for us, for sure. Accessibility is another huge area for us, and I know we're going to dig into that a little bit more. But ensuring that we are thinking about those students who learn differently, who need different equipment, and how do we keep our great folks in product who are doing amazing work from being overwhelmed by thinking about how they can create things that will reach everyone. So I think educating our employees and one of the big things that's been a part of our journey is how do we use our employees who identify with different groups to help us during this journey? And a little later as we chat, I'll be able to share some examples of that, but that's also been a very big part of our journey. Our employees really care about this. So how do we help them to also be involved in the journey?
I love that. I'd love to hear from some of the other panelists as well, and just like the journey and both how it got started and where you might be at the moment.
I can start. I think for us, it really starts with getting out of the office and into classrooms and schools. So I think I know when I taught, I had a very New York City experience, and my first kind of task for myself was to get out to other places around the country and embed in schools and like sit and observe. And I think when I started 19 years ago, I didn't understand the user research was what I was doing. I was co-designing with teachers without quite knowing the word, but just sitting and observing and working with groups of teachers and students. And today we have a fabulous user research arm of the team. Our product team is constantly going out and working with lab schools and others, but I think just really bringing teachers and students into the early stage design process with you, and then actively seeking out different learning environments. So working with the School for the Deaf, the School for the Blind, making sure that we're working in a variety of different school settings and informal settings, and continually going back to our users during the process as we iterate and actually launch, and making sure that what we're building is having the intended impact that we set out to achieve.
I'd like to double down on that real quick, because I have a saying that I use, that there's no separation between my why and my work. And I think that when you're doing this type of work, when you're centering humans, that the approach has to step outside of the agile process or the waterfall process, and really think about at what point are we thinking in a more fluid way, right, around how we have human interaction embedded into the product development process. We have an R&D team picture that I love, where it's kids, parents, families, the developers, researchers, kind of all together, and really trying to think, right, and co-lead together. It's a different phrase or different thinking when you have parents and students co-leading with you, right, and creating the ability for them to feel like the experts they are. Their lived experience is expertise. And if we're able to elevate kind of their role in the process, it becomes much more natural to the process, because many times, as we know, the features that make something more inclusive or more equitable can end up falling off, right, of the roadmap. And I think it's part of having this co-leadership, co-research, and co-design approach that allows the continuity of inclusion to follow all the way through to the creation process.
I love, Kimberly, what you said about not separating the why from the work. And I think one of the things that we're really intentional about at Seesaw is hiring people who have a why that is aligned with our values, because at the end of the day, you can implement processes and systems, and you should. But if you have people who deeply care about this, they're going to go the extra mile to make sure the accessibility feature makes it in the first launch or immediately after. They're going to do the extra work to make sure that the curriculum is designed with honoring a student's home language, or honoring a family dynamic that or makeup that may not look like, what you see in mainstream media. And I think, the user-centeredness of it all has been at the core of Seesaw's DNA from the start. Seesaw is about 10 years old. I've been at the company under 2 years, so I can't take a lot of credit. Seesaw's done some amazing work to kind of grow up as a user-centered, co-building organization. But as we've matured, I think we've gone from having user-centeredness at the center of what we do to really systematizing those things. And I think that hiring people from different backgrounds that represent the students and teachers we're serving has been a critical part of that journey, and has led us to do things like implement accessibility guidelines. So spearheaded by one of our product managers, that, we had accessibility guidelines, but now we have rules. They must be implemented in the first release or in the fast follow period immediately after, which basically is the first release. And just having that rule in place and what those are. On our curriculum side, we have a set of curriculum guidelines that go far beyond, I think a lot of us are critical of the way this all started, which was checklists, like must show a person of color, like must have like one student in a wheelchair, and, the tokenization, which, was a form of representation, but we know isn't enough. Now, because we have people who have been students or teachers with those resources, taking those things many, many steps further. And I've really seen Seesaw, even in the past couple of years, kind of cement those guidelines, make sure they're used cross-functionally. So they're not just product guidelines, but they're marketing guidelines and professional learning. And we're constantly like kind of getting that feedback from our users and bringing it back. So it's been fun to see something that I think started with such a strong foundation really take that and grow. And to be honest, I think we probably have a long way to go, which is equally exciting and important.
Yeah, I love all those answers. There's a bunch of threads that I want to pull. I loved, Sarah, how you pulled together both the mission and the people and how important it is to have folks who really, really care. But also you made that part of the process. And just thinking about whether it's the product process or the hiring process or other things, there are these structures and frameworks that we also draw on. So Kimberly, I know that that's something that you and Digital Promise have worked a lot on. Do you want to dig a little bit further into some of the frameworks around equity and inclusion process and how folks can pull on those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I do want to name, I have worked for a while in developing products along the way through Discovery Education. I was there for almost 10 years. Also, I see PBS out in the audience. With a shout out to PBS Learning Media. So I, have over the years have created all sorts of technical products and services, and was actually late in my learning, honestly, around how much process influences product. And when I came to Digital Promise and had an opportunity to work side by side with school districts and families and communities, when we think about if you're a school district leader and you're thinking about, okay, I need to serve every single student in this building. And if I go out into the world and bring in solutions, I need help in understanding kind of how those solutions are going to fit and adapt to our kids. And so we actually built inclusive innovation so that school districts could actually work with their communities to be and entrepreneurs in a co-creation process, because it's so important when we think about this idea of student voice, right? Let's just take student voice. Everybody's talking about student voice right now, right? But the intention, thank you, Deanna, the intention of students and the role they play, right? Because on our team, we even thought about, we need to stop saying the word student, because the minute you say the word student, it actually puts the adult here and the student here. And when you think about really trying to create products that serve students well, you actually need to think about yourself as an adult, right, on the same plane as a student. And in many cases, the student actually knows more than you do. And that actually changes the product, right? Bringing students more meaningful into the process as leaders, as deciders, decision makers, as ideators, as creators, right? And I know that sounds complex, but there are ways that we can do that really do make a difference. Or parents. One thing that's been interesting for us is to think about bilingual and multilingual students and parent-student pairs, right? Coming in together and co-design, co-creating with EdTech, with solution providers. So I just want to name that what's really important for us is co-leadership, is honoring the context expertise of those with lived experience, is really making sure that you are working in context, right, of your students and understanding them. And, there are personas, right, to think about personas and other tools that we use. But I would encourage, because we see, and I'll give you one example and I'll just wrap up here real quick. What comes out on the other end is very different. We started in one school district with a provider around student mental health. The resulting solution was student-led mental health PD for teachers. Students wanted to design professional development for teachers to help teachers learn how to help students. there's no way Kim would have thought about that solution, right? And so it just gives you an example of it is possible for things to come out on the other end that are different than we imagined if we have that proximity. And I'll stop there.
That was really amazing, and I love that story. That brings me in a little bit to thinking about some of the pressures that we face, those of us who are creating software, working for organizations that have, I think, a lot of very understandable pressure to bring products into market as quickly as possible, whether that's from a mission perspective or a business perspective. In many cases, for us, it's both. So I want to get some thoughts from the panel around us. I think someone mentioned Agile earlier, just some of the ways in which you've tried to incorporate end user voices, whether it's student voice or teacher voice or family voice, and shift processes when you are under a tight timeline, or at least when you feel like you're under a tight timeline, because that can be the toughest situation.
I think my career, I've only known feeling like I was under a tight timeline. I've tried to, as I've progressed in my career, tried to understand what is false urgency and what isn't. But when you work in education, I'm sure many of you feel this way. Everything feels urgent because everything is urgent. A kid who's a kindergartner today and experiencing your product today doesn't get that day back. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is really impressive about the work that the team at Seesaw has been doing since before me is having kind of a variety of ways to get end user voice. And so the way that I think about it now, and shout out to our head of UX who got me a stat that we have over a dozen different ways that we incorporate end user voice. And I think that that just goes to show that if you, it's not about having a million ways so much as if you can have different ways. I think of like some extra small, some medium, some large ways to collect end user voice, user feedback, research. You can pick and choose what fits your timeline. And I found that by establishing repeatable ways to get that end user voice, it kind of, it allows you to move faster, right? Because you're not getting the process of collecting user feedback up and running while you're also trying to build the product. So just to be really, really specific, some of the things that have worked really well at Seesaw that are on the smaller end, because I think the bigger end of things like formal user research, which can take months and months, or really testing and iterating and co-building or I love co-leading. I want to use that and think about how that might change the way we think about co-building. But co-leading, all those things take a lot longer and they're important when you have the time and you can work up front. But some of the things that are kind of quicker, anything from a former educators group on Slack or Teams or whatever your team uses, and then those former educators asking their friends. That's one way to do it. We have something called Feedback Squad, which our amazing community team pulls in users, just a couple of them, to get quick feedback. We do this very often and we have a process for it. And you don't really have to prepare. You can just go in and speak openly and ask questions and people give feedback. There's kind of Facebook groups, social media, asking for feedback that way. Quick usability studies. There's plenty of unmoderated and moderated tools out there that can help you get feedback really quickly from users or non-users. So those are things that, we've kind of established a bunch of those different processes. And when we think about what are we going to do to get that feedback, because at Seesaw, it's instrumental. You don't ever build anything without a ton of feedback. All along the way, we just think about which of those are going to fit our timeline. And if we don't feel good enough about the feedback we're getting while we're building, we make sure that there's time after it's live to really incorporate that feedback. Our support team, which is amazing, they collect feedback for us. Our social media folks collect feedback for us. So just kind of institutionalizing those ways has allowed us to, I've said feedback a lot because we get a lot of feedback. It makes our product that much better, but allows us still to move really quickly. I'm curious what other folks do.
Yeah, it's going to say very similar kind of feedback loops. One of the things that's always been so amazing to me is when we have an opportunity, which is my favorite part of my job is being able to walk in classrooms and actually seeing students use the products and talking to teachers and students. And it's so amazing to do that. I can think of a couple instances where the person with me was from the product team, and we get direct feedback from a student, and we go back and the next week it's changed, right? And it just reminds you of like how important it is for us to be able to talk and just because a lot of the loops do take a long time, and it's, quantitative, and we're looking at tons of data, and all of that is super important. But I think, having those conversations and them just saying, hey, I had to click twice to do this, but when I play a game at home, I only have to click once. So since I didn't want to do that, I went somewhere else. We're like, we can fix that, right? So I think it's just super important for us to remember we're dealing, and students love to tell you all the things that don't work. So we've found it very, very, and the things that do work, but we found it very, very helpful just having those conversations and having opportunities to be in the classroom.
Yeah, I think there's something really to the timing and having multiple approaches that, like what both of you said. I think there are, just like multiple means for us to get at beta testing, early testing, or early feedback from everything from, our like we have certified BrainPOP educator communities that we give sneak peeks of things, and early advisors to, when we have a bit more time to do things like diary studies and really actually intentionally take a slower approach because we want to learn what we don't know, and are really able to observe and get feedback a very different way. So hopefully we're all laddering in different levels of research and approach. And I think we're also building products that are able to continually evolve and fix things and make it better and iterate. So I think that is a beautiful thing, that there's the expectation now that you're constantly improving and delivering more and more value.
Yeah, I love that. And it is one of the things that drew me to software in the first place, is just the idea that you can continually be improving it and getting that feedback. I think a couple of you, Sarah, maybe you brought in the idea of those internal resource groups, whether it's a employee research group or a Slack channel with former educators or folks with a specific life experience. I'd love to hear, just real quick round, folks, how you have engaged employees in this. I feel like it's come up a couple times in the conversation, and I'd love to just hear a couple stories.
I'm happy to jump in there too. We've had an amazing opportunities to bring in our employee resource groups as well, so our ERGs. So a couple quick examples. Obviously, February was Black History Month, and one of our products, Pear Deck, provides decks for teachers to for a number of all different subjects, but specifically we have a Black History deck where they can go in and helps them already have lesson plans for different folks in different times that were specifically about Black history. And so this year we decided that we would tap into our Black ERG and have them come up with some folks that they don't typically see highlighted during Black History Month, or, lesser known facts, et cetera. And so they worked together with our content team and created a number of decks. And I just got a stat, I don't have the number on me right now, but the decks were used like 13 times the amount from the year before, where we kind of had our standard decks. And for the folks internally that worked on it, for them to know that they actually, because they're in different departments, most of them not in product or in content, to know that they created something that was actually in the classroom. Many of them are former educators. So they were absolutely over the top about being able to participate, and for us to see how high they rated with teachers and how much they were used was really a real win. So on top of utilizing our end users, I think looking at our employee base, we've had some really great opportunities there. Also with language, some examples with our Spanish, our Latinx employee resource group helping us as we were doing things specifically for those with Spanish as their first language.
I'd say similarly, we have a process that we've put in place for our DEIB committee, that we even have a subcommittee that's specifically around content. So they're able to not only see content as it's in development and weigh in and give feedback. They're able to see the content roadmap and weigh in and give feedback on what we plan on developing, as well as just doing audits of existing content and having an opportunity to share feedback with the team. So I think for us, making sure our DEIB committee is actually having their hands into our content and our product development is incredibly important.
Well, thank you all. I want to tackle something that might be a little bit more difficult. You know, at Clever, we believe that students deserve to have ed tech that serves them no matter their background, their gender, their ethnicity, whether they have disabilities. But there's a lot going on in the political landscape right now. There's some pushback against some of the ideas that we've had around inclusion and diversity. And there is some legislation that's happening. And so I think from all of our perspectives as creators, as educators, as folks who are working on this stuff, I would love to just hear how you all have been navigating this current political landscape and the very real effects it's had both on, you know, our organizations, but also more importantly, the students and the educators out there who are dealing with this.
I can go ahead. I think I've been in the, like, you know, we've been in this interesting, to say the least, political landscape for a little bit of time now. And I think, Jamie, what you just said, the kind of stance that both Seesaw and my prior organization, Nearpod, took was, you know, it is our job to serve students and serve educators, and stay true to our mission. And I think the lens through which both, you know, we took at Nearpod and at Seesaw is, how do we help educators do their jobs? Because that's kind of the nature of both products. And so we thought about this in a couple of ways. I think first, our mission, it's critical to our mission and values that we provide inclusive instructional resources that facilitate a sense of belonging for all students. Toward that end, there are kind of some non-controversial things we can do, like make I think more on the software development side. In my role, I have the honor of both getting to work with our software product team and our curriculum team. And on the software development side, it's a lot less controversial. Accessibility, you know, the Seesaw is all about different multimodal tools, so different modalities, learning. Those things allow a sense of inclusivity in ways that are you know, less challenging politically. On the curriculum side, totally transparently, it's been really hard. I think at Seesaw, we've said we have a set of values. Those values mean that students deserve to see themselves in their content and have their identities honored, and that we must portray an accurate representation of history that expands past a Eurocentric lens. And we think we do that in a way that adheres to not only the truth, but what students need and the law in most cases. But we also know that educators have a really challenging task in front of them, both because of the laws that have been passed and because I actually think the laws are not as restrictive as the interpretation or the fear of the laws, and the desire of some administrations and some school districts to take some extra steps to make sure that they are not getting into trouble. And toward that end, you know, there's been some tough conversations, but we've said, you know, it is our job to support educators. And one of the things educators must do, especially district administrators, is decide what is appropriate for their school district and what isn't. And so really specifically, we have a couple of tools that allow them to curate what makes sense for their district and what doesn't. And with that said, I think, you know, we've made some of those decisions to empower educators with those tools, but we also monitor their usage really, really closely, because we know there's a very fine line between a district doing what that district needs to do for their students and crossing a boundary with our values and our mission. So we have to monitor the usage of the tool, how it's being implemented, and toward that end, we maintain a lot of control. So just to be really, really specific, I know there are other providers in the room. We have a tool that allows administrators to decide what content is available or not to their students, but it is not a tool that is just readily available no matter what. You have to contact our team and we have to turn that on for you. And then we have a chance to talk to you and guide you and support you through how you might use that in a way that's responsible and make sure your students are getting standards aligned instruction. And so that's just one way that we've handled it. I know a couple of other organizations have handled it the same way. And I think that the most important part of that process to me is engaging a lot of stakeholders in the conversation and then not ending the conversation. So we had a conversation, we made a decision around that feature, we monitor it. The product manager who's in charge of it contacts me every time we have to use it, which has been twice so far. So that feels good. Again, to the fear of the legislation more so than the reality of it. But that we're constantly assessing if that's the right thing to do, if we need to do more, if we need to do something different, what are other people doing? So with that in mind, I would love to hear what other people are doing.
I just want to say what Sarah is voicing about like the fear factor, or is where I think we have an important role to play. And I think administrators, just like teachers, like they got into this because they want to help students and do right by students and make a difference. And I think they're really, there's a lot of fear right now with some of the laws that are being passed. And what the worst case scenario is that there's a chilling effect, or they're overly restricting or taking things out, or avoiding tough topics because they're afraid of legislation that, in many cases, there actually is the basis and the standards for why educators need to cover topics. And so partly what we can do is help provide and share information with our partners and partner with them on what is okay to do and to use and to share stories, of how administrators are finding ways to continue to serve students and make sure their social emotional needs are met and that they're able to deliver the instruction that they know is so important. So I think really taking an approach where you're partnering with administrators to help them navigate the current landscape is really important.
Very similar to both Sarah and Karina. I think many of us in this space are kind of handling it very similarly. I think in my role as I'm also our Chief Public Affairs Officer, which is a whole other area in that I do have what feels to me like a privilege to speak to legislators and staffers to help educate them because not only are our students and our teachers scared, they're using, these buzzwords that are kind of making folks feel like they can't do certain things. And when you really go through it, the legislation, it is not quite. So helping them to interpret it, but also I think helping legislators and their staffers, the folks who are making these decisions, really understand what is happening in the classroom, not kind of what, this picture that has been made about like what is being taught and kids turning against kids and making kids feel bad, like, helping them really understand how our curriculums and how we're helping teachers and helping students and what belonging really means, I think has been super, super meaningful and helpful also. So along with how we're supporting our teachers, I think we are in a highly regulated industry. And so whenever we have the opportunity for them to hear our voices, as well as our customers, it's super important as well.
The only thing I'll add is that this idea of protecting the work at all costs, I think that I am, in working with district leaders, and I can't tell you the number of superintendents and district leaders that have left the scene, right? Because of just the climate. It has been almost heartbreaking to work with people that their lives have been committed to this work and then they have found it untenable. And so, my promise to them has been to do whatever I need to do to protect the work. And that is, that means different things in different places and spaces. But I think that we're learning how to navigate because at the end of the day, one superintendent said to me that he was in a conversation with a person that was really against a strategy, equity-based strategy that he was implementing. And he said that when I had a conversation with that gentleman and helped him understand that this is students and families, and it just almost diffused, right, the situation. And so I've been stunned at how the narrative takeover has been a large part of the issue here, that underneath that everyone is okay for the most part doing the work, together, and acknowledging, identity and belonging is important. So sometimes we have to frame it differently, right? And to try to make sure the work continues. And I will say here that that's different in every state that we're navigating with every district. And I know you all are feeling that as well when you're developing products, but it's really trying to figure out, like, how do we kind of take the narrative and move it in a new direction that can be more embraced, shall we say, just so the work can continue.
Well, thanks to all of you. We are getting close to the end. Thank you all for going through that tougher question with me. We have some fantastic questions from folks in the audience. I'm going to start with one and see how far we get. Anjal asked, talking about different processes, and this came up, Sarah, when you were talking about Seesaw and the different ways that you get feedback from users. How do you bring all that together? Like, classic sort of user research question, like when you have feedback from multiple sources, maybe students think one thing, teachers another, different methods. How do you pull that together? And then I'll open up to everyone else as well.
Not sure I have a good answer. I think you have magical, hardworking product managers and curriculum developers who are good at getting in, kind of tons of information at once. So I will say, I actually mostly curious what other people have to say here, because I don't think my answer is great, but there are a couple of routine synthesis processes that we have in place. For example, we've got somebody on our product marketing team who runs a certain report on support tickets and inbound feedback, and has the same format that she uses every month, and shares that to the team. We have a user research team that shares things out in decks or in quick lunch and learn. So we do have a couple of established ways of synthesizing feedback, but I think I've got at least one or two of my product managers in this room, and they would probably say that's a hard part of their job. So anybody have any tips? I would love to hear them.
I would just say, I think it's science and art, because, especially when we're talking about building inclusive products, it's not like just sheer number of requests can always make sure that we're, building products for students, especially in the margins. So we there might be a smaller number of students that are impacted by something, but it would prevent them from using the product, or it's so important, and it might not show up just if we just look at the more quantitative data or requests that are coming in. So I think there is a balance in having multiple sources of data, but not just looking at like reach and impact numbers, but really, are we delivering on the mission that's important for all students?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think across all of our roles, probably it's when you find these great ways to get all the different perspectives, it's like how that I think that's where most of us, one of the biggest challenges. I think for us, we have, again, several measures. One of the ways that we've been kind of working on combining as well is that we do have an incubator, which is full of teachers and administrators, and even getting student feedback. We make sure that that group is intentionally extremely diverse, that we have diverse schools participating, and teachers who serve, a certain amount of teachers who serve over a percentage of IEP students, et cetera. So I think trying to pull in those diverse perspectives into the ways that we are already collecting has certainly been very helpful. We do still find, though, if we start grouping them out by zip codes or by where we know our Title I schools, you can definitely see trends going in different directions. So figuring out what we're going to really focus on is something that we're continuing to work through. But I think with the conversation like we're having today and this work that we're doing in general around product inclusion, that's going to be, you know, the rubber meets the road. Is like, you know, we're figuring out strategies and frameworks. And now it's like, how do we pull all of that in collectively and give it equal weight? And so we're continuing to work through that. And I love continuing to talk to folks who are working on this so that we're all kind of learning techniques to work through that.
I love that. And I really love that mental picture of just figuring out how to pull all of those threads together. I think that's a really important part of the work that we do. And I'm seeing that we're coming close to the top of the hour. So even though I have a ton more amazing questions from our lovely audience, Erin in the chat has given a couple of other places where folks can catch up with that and maybe ask the questions for this group. I just want to take the moment to thank you all, the panelists, for coming up and sharing your wisdom and telling some of these stories and getting this. And I want to thank the audience for also asking fantastic questions. If you've been watching the chat, there's been some great comments and some great ideas. And I just find it really inspiring how passionate this community is about creating really inclusive software. So hopefully this is just 1 hour. This is just a little bit of ideas and thoughts and everything, but I'm incredibly grateful that we've been able to pull this group together. And hopefully we'll have more like this in the future. So I want to thank everybody. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. And maybe think a little bit about, in your own work, everyone in the audience, how you can bring some of these ideas to life in your own work. All right. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, James.